We're set to go. Okay, ladies, so thank you again. This was the objective. The objective is to improve school culture using some performance data. The data that we have in front of you is a packet that I compiled that would include reports from the TAPR, TPCR, that is the federal and state report cards, and the STAR report cards. The STAR report cards are in reverse order for the last 4 years, from 23 to 19. Again, we're not going to refer to these directly, but this is where I got everything from. So my objective was to use this data to identify a performance deficiency. This is what I found in my own analysis. Based on this data, I have found a low performance metric in ELAR that is below stated goal, below state average. However, there's also a caveat. If you look closely enough, I believe I've also identified a potential causal relationship between ELAR performance and our EBEL population. So I did confer with our instructional coach and with our migrant aide to go over this with them and to verify. And we have conferred, yes, there is a causal relationship between the EBEL student population and our ELAR performance data. So as a campus, we are not underperforming as this data may suggest, but we are collectively failing to differentiate and support this targeted population. So let's talk about that population. EBELs, Emerging Bilinguals English Learners. These data reports will show we have a sizable percentage of EBEL students, and we have a higher rate of mobility, that is migrant students. This is what I learned from our migrant aide. Currently we have about 40 EB students. She also has 20 migrant students. In other words, she is only able to service half or less of the students that need her assistance. Half or less of our English learners receive adequate mediation. In addition, she is not certified, therefore she has no Skyward access, which means she is not able to monitor or prioritize students on a greatest needs basis. So that is the context of the issue that we have. Let's talk about how we could pragmatically respond to that. So if I were king for a day, if we had fiscal resources available to allocate for this matter, we may be able to have a conversation of onboarding a full-time faculty member that is certified. That would entail Skyward access. That would also entail extended hours, because if you're salaried, you're here before and after the hourly employees. So it would be providing more availability to the students. However, that's not where we're at right now. Until resources are available to service the matter, we have to focus on what we can do. So here are my questions. My first question is, how often do your EB students speak English in your classes?
Well, if they're beginners, none.
Okay.
No, definitely at the beginning level, they don't.
Okay.
And sometimes, like, they don't even use their resources to translate.
Well, mine, they speak Spanish, but they use their resources for English purposes, like to translate in English. But they do try.
If they're part of the migrant program, then they have iPads that they can use to translate. If they are not part of the migrant program, then they don't have it.
So I mentioned that to Miss Vera a week or so ago, and she said that there should be enough iPads for all of them.
So
So if
migrant
they-
and EBs?
I don't
So
think
if they
have
don't, then we need to, will you just check in and just see how many of them, or all of y'all check in and see which ones do and don't, if there's one that needed? Because she said no, and I said, I know we have them for migrant, because it was like migrant money, and she said, no, we bought them for everybody for translation purposes.
Unless it was
So,
under the understanding, maybe when I came into them, they said it was for the migrant students.
right, oh yeah,
And
absolutely.
then, but, I don't know, I had them in my room. I don't think it was 40, but. I'll
Maybe
check
there's
out.
more somewhere else that we can get a hold of.
Yeah, I'll
So.
check with the local.
I think when that, so I had one student, he was there and now he's not, because they figured out I heard he had the credit for English 1, and so now he's English 2, but, it really depends on the level that the student is coming in, because he was more willing to, even though he doesn't speak, fluent English, he was willing to tell me his answer in English, like just reading it. But there's not a lot of our EB students that come in that are willing to do that. A lot of the students that we get, unfortunately, are mostly at the beginner level.
Level 1 and 2.
Yeah, they come, like, their high school years is their first years, like, in the US and like having to speak and intermingle with.
And if they are driven, they're gonna get it. But if they have like a lower, or maybe no educational level from their country and they come in, it's gonna be so hard for them that they're just kind of like, but some of them are not driven, and so it's harder to get them to, try to do stuff to learn a little bit English.
You're right.
Well, it's even, I had just had a new student, he was out of school for like 8 or 9 months. He was not enrolled in school at all. And it's hard to tell, is he just out of practice of doing academic things, or
Not motivated.
does he, or is he not motivated, or is it just a language barrier, or does he have,
Academic
academic
disabilities.
disability
On
that's
top of-
on top of the language barrier? So it's like you have to find time to figure all of that out before you can even,
Peel the onion and.
Agreed. So my follow-up question, are you satisfied with the amount that your EB students speak English in your classes?
It's not valued in their families, to be honest, and that's tied to the frequency of them using it outside of school. They don't use it outside of school, because it's not valued within their households. While they're at school, they do, definitely engage in that. And to be totally honest, when we look at we went over our ESSA federal guidelines, we exceeded that, and a lot of that had to do with what we did last year. We've never done it in the history of Brownfield where we're in a corrective action position, and that's K through 12 with our EBs. The biggest number of EBs are in elementary, not middle school, but elementary and high school. And we're trying to develop a corrective action plan that addresses it from K through 12. The most we've seen in success has been this past year. A lot of that has to do with Ms. Munoz as well as what Kelly was able to do. And also Mr. Flores, and also our counselor, Ms. Herrera, which is also our migrant and our ESL, that's the team. We call it a cohort team for our EBs. This is the most they've ever, a lot of them did complain about it, the kids, because they never been pushed that hard, but they did get results out of them and close those gaps. So if we're
But
talking about,
I do think if we had like another body,
I tried,
Another-
yeah, I agree, or even the aides,
yeah,
that was shot down. I mean, I'm just telling you.
yeah.
Without that additional resource,
The case manager.
I have some strategies that I've organized, either a support or procedure or a resource. And this is something that we could do starting now. And this comes out of my discussion with our instructional coach and the migrant aide. So the first one, as a support, if we can preemptively communicate with the migrant aide to let them know that a student might need help, rather than waiting for a progress report, waiting for a report card, or waiting for the student to go to them, because we don't know that the student is going to reach out to support. If we can preemptively communicate with the migrant aide and let them know I think the student might need some help, that would be a support.
So what do we do with the ones that aren't migrant, that are ED and need help?
I'm putting them into the same population.
So.
As far as the mediation, the supports, the resources that we can have right now, the strategies to help them, I am putting EBs and migrants into the same category. Because we don't have a person designated to service just one or the other population, they're shared unfairly between one person. So a lot of this is going to occur in the classroom, not in a support role.
But can she serve the EBs that are not?
She can if she had the time. She has her too many for one person.
I'm just wondering because of the funds.
Right,
That
her pay is for a migrant,
Migrant.
so.
And she's not salary, she's hourly, so she doesn't come at 7:35 like we would, we're staying after like we would, clocking like I go, so we're restricted there. Another thing, our checks for understanding should require a verbal confirmation and explanation rather than a nonverbal cue or a social cue such as a thumbs up or, a head nod. If we had a check for understanding that required a verbal explanation, that would also be another support. As a procedure, and again, these are the ideas that you can bounce back with me. As a procedure, You already mentioned the iPad and the Google Translate, the live speech to text translation. Remind them to use their iPads, turn them on, speaking slowly and clearly, which is impossible in an instructional context, I understand. But what if we required our ED students to speak English in every context? For example, I was speaking with a migrant aide, and she told me that students work harder and come to her more regularly when you require them to submit work or present work, verbal presentations in English. So if we can leverage that expectation against them, they will work harder. She spoke in terms of providing too much support. If we allow them too much of a concession to use their Spanish resources, then we're not leveraging that expectation against them, and they're not going to perform. But she said if you challenge them, they will do it. So
They'll do it moaning and kicking.
They will, but they'll do
I'm
it.
just saying.
They gonna learn though.
So
I haven't
like
either.
the new student that I have in my class, I was asked that question, do you want him to respond in English or Spanish? And I said, definitely English, but he's able to type out his response in Spanish. And his iPad translates
Yeah,
it
translates.
into English, and then he has to transfer his English response to the paper. So he's getting to type it, and then he sees what it looks like in English, and then he's also writing it in English. So, I mean, it's a multi-step process,
Yes.
and it takes longer, so
Yes.
they do have to have more time,
yes.
but he is getting there.
Is he able to read it in English and then say it in English?
So that would be like a next step that we would follow with him.
That would be the goal. Yeah, I know that's complicated and more steps, but I'd say that's a win. That's a
Yeah.
pathway to learning.
And on Microsoft Word, I saw one of my students use this. There's like this little box that pops up in the corner. They write in Spanish, but on the document, it translates it in English.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Mm.
I
It
do
is,
know-
it does, yep.
Yeah.
I do
That's
know
cool.
on Word documents, if you have those real beginning kids who just don't know English at all,
Yeah.
you can on Word translate a document from English to whatever
Yep.
language they speak. I learned that last year, cause I did not know.
Y'all remember PowerPoint? It's been a year or so since we've talked about it, but PowerPoint will live translate for you, like just have it up there and it'll,
Well, and honestly, it's easier it's better if they can do it, like, type it out and while it's translating, because if they write in Spanish, and even if I'm trying to translate it, it doesn't always come across as the way that they were trying to
Yes.
say it, so.
right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's not necessarily.
So the last thing is, as a resource, I don't know if this exists yet, but I'm gonna look, even though this isn't my field. I find that it would be really beneficial if we could have some sort of a dynamic equivalence lexicon. So in language translations, either a language is formally equivalent or it is dynamic equivalent. A formal equivalence will be a word-for-word translation, which always gets lost in context. We don't understand these things. But if we could find a lexicon that was a dynamic equivalence, then it would be a thought-for-thought, meaning-for-meaning to provide context and implications. If I could find something like that, I think that would service them well too. That would be a resource that I would recommend.
There's your $1 million idea.
Yeah.
Make
Final
the app.
thoughts?
We've come a long ways.
I think you're on track with,
Mhm.
like, your thinking. It literally is just, we need more resources and more people to fulfill the,
Mhm.
because I know personally, the classes that those students end up in, especially right now for English 1, those are my
They're big.
biggest classes, and
Mhm.
so you're talking about you have all of your special populations in those classes,
Yes.
and you're trying to service them all, and even though you have an inclusion person in there, it is not possible to hit every special population, plus your just low students, plus do your check-ins with your EB students,
And all
because,
your help
because
strategies.
yeah, it's just not always feasible to
Right.
do, and you feel like you're just trying to
It's
do
an
it,
imperfect system. Yeah.
so, but,
Agreed. I'm very appreciative of it, thank you. Please take those cookies with you.